Hey guys, this is Tauna, and today we're going to be going over the top 10 Commander Precons to bring you guys into 2025. You know, we do an upgrade on this usually every set that kind of comes out, and I like adjusting it when, you know, things are coming out, new sales and stuff, or when Precons are becoming harder to find. So I didn't want to kind of wait until the next set comes out, which is quite a little bit from now. I wanted to do like an upgrade to kind of show you guys as we're going into 2025, you know, we're like a month and a tiny little bit away somehow, what you guys should be looking at picking up. So before we get started, these are all subjective and my personal opinions. Some are based off of strength, while other based off of fun. Generally, you know, you want to upgrade all of them, but they can usually compete against other precons, even unupgraded. And then some of them may need touch-ups even before that, depending on what it is. Most of the ones on this list shouldn't. Just thinking through. No, most of the ones on this list shouldn't need any touch-ups before fighting other precons, but if you start going above precons, then you'll want to kind of do a few upgrades. Generally, most precons, I'd say since post-2022, in my opinion, are pretty decent, though some will need more upgrades than others. Specifically, the mana base on some of those earlier ones will be. Lately, the mana bases aren't too bad since like the Doctor Who set, they've been getting a lot better. But overall, you know, you want to potentially look at upgrading here. And I will try and keep the list up to date and exclude precons that become harder to find or that will cost you your firstborn if you do want to buy them. So, before we get into it, guys, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share the video around, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm going to, you know, do a bunch of giveaways to kind of go alongside it. I've got some stuff up there to give away. I'm going to look at, you know, building a deck potentially to give away to people or, you know, some precons. I don't know. I'll figure it out as I'm kind of going what you guys want and stuff. But, you know, we have the most up-to-date news. We share precon stuff like this, silly brews, all that kind of stuff, cards to pick up as well. All right, so into our first one here, we've got the Family Matters one. So this is using the offspring mechanic to create a lot of little dudes, and it's mostly around getting a huge amount of value from Enter the Battlefield effects by essentially cloning those creatures. It's a very go wide deck. The commander is very much about, you know, going wide and having a whole bunch of, you know, 1/1 critters that are going to buff him up. And there's just an insane amount of ways that you can upgrade this. If you wanted to take it, you know, just continue on the animal theme, you could do that. If you wanted to switch it over to do all artifacts like some people have, you could do that. There's a bunch of different ways. Now, I do think the secondary commander is much better out of the box, but, you know, Zinnia is pretty good too. So looking at a couple different cards from it, you know, Zinnia, the face commander here, as I said, you know, get buffed up based off of creatures that are base power 1, and he gives all of your creatures offspring 2. So that means that when you cast them, you can pay an additional 2 mana, and then you're going to create a 1/1 copy of that. Some of the cards you might see in there are stuff like Agate Instigator here that are getting buffed up. Oh, no, sorry, not getting buffed up. Well, getting buffed up or like dealing damage and stuff off of those creatures entering the battlefield, because you're going to have a lot of creatures entering. Next up, we got the Mutant Menace one. So this is from the Fallout set, and it's based around this rad counter mechanic. So essentially, you're going to be milling opponents, and then you're going to get value from doing that. And you're also going to get a lot of counters, +1/+1 counters, which are going to buff up your creatures, a lot of generic support for them, and then proliferating as well. And, you know, if you wanted to do mill things, you can do that as well as an option. So we've got the Wise Mothman here as the face commander there, giving out those rad counters. A rad counter is essentially at the beginning of your upkeep, I believe it is, you will mill a certain amount of cards based off the rad counters you have, and then you take damage or keep the rad. You can take damage and lose the rad counter, or you just, you know, keep the rad counter depending on if it's a land or not. You got the Vexing Radgull here as well with like proliferate stuff, which is cool. All right, moving into the quick draw one. So this is a Spellslinger deck that is all like, you know, based around playing a whole bunch of cards per turn and then getting the benefits for your creatures from doing so. It very much has a lot of those Izzet staples as well. And a lot of ways to cast lots of cards in a turn, and it can be upgraded into a very, very powerful deck very easily. Like this commander here, Stella Lee, is literally in CEDH, so like competitive EDH, because she is just that powerful, having the ability to just go infinite so easily. You got other stuff in here like Propaganda too, which is a way to be able to protect yourself to stop opponents from wanting to attack you because they need to pay extra for their creatures to attack. We've got Desert Bloom, which is probably my personal favorite precon of all time. I've added onto this list. Out of the box, it is a little bit more rough, but I do think it is worth definitely picking up. You play a lot of lands, you sacrifice some lands, you create some awesome plant people. It plays very aggressively and can be upgraded in a huge variety of ways. If you want to focus on some more mill stuff to mill yourself, then you can do that. If you want to actually, you know, discard lands, you've got that option as well. There's also a side theme of landfall that plays really well, and they've got some big staples from that, like the Ancient Green Warden here. Yuma, as I said, is about sacrificing your land, so whenever they attack or enter the battlefield, you get to sacrifice a land, preferably deserts, because then when deserts enter your graveyard from anywhere, you're going to create a plant warrior, which is really cool. Next up, we've got the Virtue and Valor one. So this one here is all about auras. So you're going to grab auras, enchantments, and you're going to be buffing up your creatures with them. And a lot of cute critters and stuff. Like, I love the face chick here, Elevere. She's very good. It's a very good newer player deck as well. Like, it's pretty straightforward. You get some cute critters. You get to learn about auras. And it has just, you know, a lot of those staples for that kind of stuff. As well as the fact that there are just so many auras coming out, or that have come out, that you will forever have upgrades for it. So looking at a couple cards from it, you've got some really big auras in here that are rarer to find as well, like Songbird's Blessing here. And then Elevere here, the face commander, making it so you're creating auras, but those auras are tokens. So you get to just create a token aura, essentially, that's attached to a creature you control. Really, really cool. And then you also get to draw cards from her. It's just like everything you want in a commander. All right, moving on to the Peace Offering one. So this is a group hug deck, not group slug, group hug, where you get to be friendly with everyone, give them stuff, hand them cards, you know, that kind of stuff, and then you get to stab them in the back later on to win. You give nice stuff to everyone, primarily card draw, and then you've got big creatures that you can buff up and then throw them at people and stuff. There's lots of really great ways to win this. I've got this deck and I've built it around alternate win cons, so stuff like, you know, if you were to draw a card while your deck's empty, or, you know, approach from the second stun. It's probably one of my favorite decks of all time that I've built, upgraded. It's definitely a more difficult deck as well for newer players, so we'll kind of put a warning in there. It's a more difficult deck for newer players because it requires you to kind of politic and make deals and negotiate and kind of understand a little bit of who the threat is, who's going to potentially stop you from doing what you want to do. So a couple cards from it. Miss Bumbleflower here, as I said, she's going to let opponents draw cards, and then you get to buff up your creatures with her, and then you get to draw cards as well if you cast 2 spells in a turn. And then 20-toed Toad is in it as well, which is an alternate win con. So it's if you attack, if you either have 20 cards in your hand or more, or 20 counters on him or more, then you get to win the game, which is really cool. We got the Deep Clue Seas. So this is a very heavy on card draw and getting advantage from drawing 2+ cards. It would be like when you draw your second card per turn, do this, which is a theme that's been around like a little bit, and it's kind of they come back to it every once in a while. So it's really cool. The secondary mechanic is tokens as well. There's a lot of nice stapley clue token stuff, or just tokens in general in here. So if you want to create, like, you know, clue tokens or treasure tokens or food tokens, there's lots of cool stuff to kind of synergize well with that in here, and like double them and stuff like that. We've got like Morska, who's the face commander here, as I said before, about the drawing a second card per turn. She gets buffed up if you do that, as well as the fact that she creates clue tokens. And then you've got Coma in here, which is an amazing reprint, not a new card in this set, but a reprint. And that's going to create these blue serpent creature tokens on each person's upkeep. So not just yours, every person's. And just, yeah, it's just a great way to make use of these tokens. And I want to kind of show one that has like tokeny stuff, because it is card draw, but it's tokens as well. They mix the themes pretty well. We got the Jumpscare Precon, which is probably my favorite from Duskborn. And I'm saying my favorite a lot, but they're different favorites. It's a very interesting take on the face down creature mechanic, as well as a side kind of mechanic of landfall. There's lots of landfall staples in here, as well as, you know, the one I talked about before. And it's very easy to upgrade this into more interesting ways. So if you want some more graveyard synergy, because you're going to be doing that Manifest Dread, which is going to put stuff into your graveyard and onto the battlefield. Or if you want more stuff to flip stuff or more landfall stuff, you can build it in just a variety of different ways and upgrade it in a variety of different ways as well. So looking at it, you know, you've got Zamon as your face commander here, which is whenever a land enters, you get to manifest dread. So you're going to look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one face down on the battlefield as a 2/2 creature, and then one into your graveyard. And then on the second time that you, second time a land enters, you're then going to get to flip one of those. So you're cheating stuff out really well with it by just playing lands. And then you've got the reprint here for AC as well. As you can see, you know, additional landfalls, and whenever a land enters, draw cards. An amazing card to kind of go alongside it. We've got the Death Toll one. Now, some people don't agree with this one, or think it's a bit, you know, janky and stuff. After playing around with it and stuff, it is actually a really, really nice deck. I do not like the face commander for it, just because of the fact that he does exile those cards from your graveyard. But if you've got enough self-mill, it works well. So it's a mill-based deck where you're milling cards from the top, taking cards from the top of your library, put them into the graveyard. But also there's a side bit of that reanimation where you get to reanimate, bring things back from your graveyard back onto the battlefield. There's also like this other secondary theme because of the fact that Winter is based off the Delirium, which is based off of, you know, card types in your graveyard. There's this secondary theme of things having 2 card types. So like, you know, you've got enchantment creatures or, you know, kindred enchantments and stuff like that. Like just combining those card types to enable you to be able to proc Delirium easy. So, as I said about Winter, I'm not a huge fan of him just because he does, you know, exile cards from your graveyard, and then he does put a finality counter on whatever creature comes out, which means that when it dies next, it's going to get exiled as well. So you're kind of chewing through your deck a bit, but if you've got enough mill in your deck, then Winter is definitely a good commander. And then you've got over here, one of the other cards in there is this Polluted Cistern and Dim Obulate. So the Polluted Cistern is going to make it so you're dealing damage to people whenever you mill stuff, which is really cool. We've got Graveyard Overdrive. So continuing on the theme of mill decks, apparently, you know, there's a lot of mill decks in here, self-mill decks. The basic kind of precon is very much a classic Jund good stuff, but it does play rather well and rather aggressively. I know that every time I make this video and I talk about this precon, there are people who come out and they say, why did you include this precon on it? I absolutely hate this precon. Look at the comments from each video that I've done with this one on it. Every time there are people coming out and saying, that Graveyard Overdrive, I absolutely love it. Just kind of like, you know, just be open-minded. And yeah, I've upgraded myself into this Lagoif tribal where, you know, I'm milling myself and then these Lagoifs hit the graveyard and they come back onto the battlefield and then I'm just cheating stuff out that way. I do think this secondary commander is better pre-upgrading it. And this is one that I do think does need to be a little bit tuned, like a little bit upgraded before you play with it. But out of the box, it's not too bad either. So we've got Dissa, the Restless, as the face commander here, which is, as I said, about the Lagoifs and the Tarmogoyfs here. She's going to want them to be milled or put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. So if you discard them, it still counts. Whenever you also deal combat damage to someone, you get to create a Tarmogoyf token, which is going to be huge, especially if you milled yourself a bunch. And then Korum lets you play stuff in your graveyard as like, he's a secondary commander, but also works well with Dissa. So some extras in here. I've added in a few more extras, starting off with the theft ones. I do want to focus a little bit on these ones. The Mind Flayers one here is going to be a bit harder to find, but theft decks are really great if you are a newer player or if you're kind of wanting to punch up. So like, you know, you've just got your precon and these people are playing slightly upgraded precons or, you know, heavily upgraded precons. You could play a theft deck because the way the theft decks work are you're going to be stealing people's stuff, which means that they've upgraded their deck. They've got better stuff in their deck now because they've upgraded it. Now you get to steal that away. One thing to keep in mind with theft decks is that if someone's playing like a combo deck and stuff, it's going to be harder for you to be able to make use of what they've got. So you got to make choices as you're going as to what's going to work well. But both of these two decks here work really well as theft decks, and I think theft decks are great for newer players once you get a little bit of a handle on the rules, so that way you understand what's going on, because of the fact that you get to just play with so many different cards because you're just stealing other people's stuff. I will talk as well about the Miracle Worker one. I love this precon. It's one of my favorite precons of all time as well because of this whole like Heart of the Cards vibe, and I had Aminatu listed as one of my top 20 fun commanders from this year. But the actual deck out of the box is a little bit janky. It's not too bad, but I do think it does need upgrades. But once you upgrade it, oh man, this Precon is just crazy. All you need to do is add in more stuff to be able to draw cards on other people's turns, and then also, like, you know, you can adjust the enchantments a little bit there, and also like some top deck manipulation, so that way you can manipulate what's at the top, so that way when you do draw it, you know what it is already, and it's already an amazing card. So just, I love this deck, but it's one that you do need to kind of look at upgrading a little bit more beforehand. I also have these ones here. These are the ones that I've put on here that are more expensive. You potentially need to sell your firstborn or an arm or a leg or something like that to be able to get them, but they are really fun precons. Blame Game is a new one on here. It was on the list, but it's just become harder to find, especially because it's just got a bonkers reprint, new card in it. Trouble in Pairs. It's insane. But all of these decks here, I think, are really, really great decks. They're just harder to find and more expensive, hence why they're not on the actual list. I also have here a note about all the Warhammer and Lord of the Rings ones. I do think that all of those are basically worth picking up. The Lord of the Rings ones, maybe not the Elves one. It's a bit more janky and you got to upgrade it a bit more to be able to play it out of the box, but it is still pretty good. The Bloodright one specifically, I would have 100% added the Bloodrights into the actual top 10 this time, but it is harder to find because everyone wants it, because there's so many vampires coming out, and with Innistrad Remastered coming out in January, there's going to be a lot more vampires to kind of go alongside as well. And these ones here are ones that have great new cards or reprints, and they're decent out of the box, but mostly I would suggest them to kind of pull them apart. You can play them out of the box, and don't get me wrong, you can upgrade them and be really great with them and stuff, but like if you're building a deck that's got Exile stuff, the Extra from Exile has just a huge amount of these great staples with green and red for Exile. Like, you know, it's got Jeska's Will, it's got, you know, Feldorn's on the front here, which is great. You know, you got a bunch of stuff. The Revenant Recon has a huge amount of reanimation stuff that's great, and then Divine Convocation has a bunch of really great token based stuff like Nesting Dovehawk and stuff like that, where you're going to be able to, if you're building, you know, either a Jeskai or just a deck that contains white and is doing tokens like every white deck does, it's going to have some nice cards in it if you can pick them up relatively cheap, and especially the March for the Machine ones, they're getting to the point they're going on clearance, definitely worth picking up. And, you know, as a last kind of mention for extra precons, I actually build decks for you guys. So these are, while they're not precons, you do have to actually go buy the cards yourself individually. They are going to have like a list, and they are going to be under a budget. These are available if you become a member. I do post, you know, non-member ones every once in a while, but if you become a member, you're going to be able to get access to this slowly building up backlog. I'm going to start building up more that are going to be, you know, a huge amount of really great decks that are going to be able to easily compete with precons, if not be stronger than precons, because of the fact that we don't care what we put in them as long as it's strong. But I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think. If there's one that I missed, let me know. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share it around and everything like that. And let me know what your favorite precon is as well. I hope you guys had a great day, and goodbye.